So, day one of deliberations in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Jury got the case this morning. It's little after 4 now. They could, theoretically, I think they've got probably until at least 5 p.m. Central, which would be a couple hours from now, to decide for today. So they still might come back and have a verdict by the end of the day. I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and put my thoughts down on just the rest of close yesterday, the defense's close, and the prosecution's rebuttal. Because yesterday I talked about what went on in the morning, and then Binger's mixed results with his closing argument. If you remember, I thought he started strong. I liked his presentation. I thought he did good with the PowerPoint. Again, apparently a lot of people don't like PowerPoints. I've always found them very useful. But then again, I stopped using them after high school. I don't think I ever used them in college, and I certainly have never used them in real life. So maybe, people who are in the military or in corporate America have a lot more reason to hate PowerPoints than I do. But after the break and when Binger came back, I thought that it was kind of turned into a mess, and I didn't really know where he was going, and it was just turned into Kyle bad. Well, then after that was when I made my video yesterday talking about all that. And then Richards went, and I thought, you know what, Binger didn't do very good, but if Richards does, as bad as you would expect, considering how kind of bumbly and uncharismatic Binger's been throughout the trial, it might make, Richards, I meant how bad Richards has been throughout the trial, it might make Binger look good. Well, actually, I thought Richards did excellent. I found him very endearing. I liked his tenor. I mean, he was stronger at the beginning, just like Binger. I think that's the problem when you go too long, is you probably practice the beginning a lot more than the rest of it. Although I'm not the kind of person who ever practiced for public speaking type stuff. If I have to say something, I just come up with a bunch of notes and speak off the cuff. I think, whenever you try and practice a speech, it's going to come off very unnatural and stilted and stiff. But I mean, look at what I do. What's the longest thing I ever put out on YouTube? I think it was like last week, like 45 minutes. So I don't speak for as long as these guys are. Maybe if you're doing that, you can justify, there's no real way out of it other than writing, at least a framework for a speech. And in Richard's case, he went slide by slide, talking about each individual witness, which frankly is, if I was in his position, that probably would have been the easiest thing for me to do too. Because just the way I think about this stuff in my head was I organized the information from watching this whole trial. I organized it by witness. Because, you watch each witness, you take notes on each witness, what each of them say, what they say that's good for your side, and then you move on from there. If you were trying to come up with a more complex narrative and thematic structures, you'd have to mix and match things, and just chronologically, in the order that you heard the information, it's easier to go over it that way. So I don't blame Richards for that at all. I certainly couldn't have done better. And obviously I'm not a lawyer. I just mean presentation-wise, because I'm looking at this as if I were in the shoes of a juror. I'm not looking at it as if I were a lawyer. I'm looking at it as if I'm sitting on the stand, who holds my interest, who makes a more compelling case, who comes across better, who seems more trustworthy, who do I feel like as a juror I can trust to be truthful more. And yesterday, I thought Richards came across as a genuine person. And obviously the case he was making fundamentally was just something that connected more with my ideas anyway. And so it does become somewhat difficult to try and separate the effectiveness of the presentation and the charisma of the speaker from the content of their speech. But when it came to the rebuttal, it does not become that tough, because the rebuttal, surprisingly, at least to me, was not done by Binger. It was done by A.D.A. white boy, Mr. Kraus. I believe Jim Kraus was his name, who, throughout the trial, by far came across with the worst and the least charismatic out of all four attorneys that were up there. I thought that Sharafacy came across the best. Binger probably second after that, although still very slimy. I don't like it, but I do think that he did, throughout the trial, on average, came across better than Richards. Then Richards, and then all the way down to the bottom, you had Jim Kraus. And this is the guy who has the last word on this long 2-week trial, over 2 weeks. Jim Kraus is the last person who the jury gets to hear from. He's the one who's, supposed to make the last, I think it was 30 to 45 minutes, way over 30, I think. 45 minutes to an hour, probably. He's the pinch hitter. He's coming in to wrap everything up, to clean up, and to send the jury on their way to deliberate. And what he says is what is going to be at the front of their mind going into the jury room. And so what is it that A.D.A. wide boy thinks is so important? Well, in large part, he thought it was important to defend his own integrity, to make sure everybody knew that he was a good guy, and that he's prosecuting bad guys, and that the photo Chad, Mr. De Bruin, the guy with the speech impediment, who was my favorite witness of the trial, who accused him of suborning perjury, that he was, full of nonsense, and that he was, he had a few screws loose because he had a problem with there being broken glass at the police station, and it went back relitigating all of that, just trying to slander somebody who did not have nice things to say about Kraus. And then he goes into this screed, culminating in the line that, to me, was the real takeaway from his entire rebuttal. The last word on the case. This was what, if I were a juror, what would be at the front of my mind is Kraus saying the words, "Sometimes you just got to take a beating." That was his final word. That's what he wanted to leave the jury with. That his problem was that, hey, sure, maybe Kyle had a right to self-defense. Okay, I'll give him that. But he shouldn't have used a gun. He shouldn't have used an AR-15. Those are big and scary. Joseph Rosenbaum, he was just armed with his fists. He was he was 5'3", 150 pounds. He was a little manlet. And we're told that the defendant here, oh, he was a swimmer. Oh, he's a lifeguard. Well, he must be in some kind of shape. Which, I mean, that's really something coming from Jim Kraus, who is not in any kind of shape. And so Kraus comes out and he just straight up says it. Kyle Rittenhouse, he's not a real man. He's a coward. He called him a coward for shooting somebody who was chasing him down, who, again, he conceded. Sure, Kyle has a right to self-defense in this situation. But the fact that he used a gun, that was his mode of self-defense, oh boy, that's the real crime here. I mean, what a stunning admission. If I'm someone who's remotely sympathetic to Kyle, and I get into the jury room, I'm not going to use much of what Richard said. Although Richard said some good stuff. I would have been taking notes, probably, on some of the stuff that Richard said. Like, hocus pocus out of focus. That was a good line. But Kraus had the real zingers in favor of Rittenhouse. I would take Kraus, the guy who represents the other side, the prosecution, and go to one of these pro-prosecution jurors, and I would say to them, Kraus conceded that Rittenhouse had a right to self-defense. He said it right there. His only problem is that Rittenhouse used a gun to do it. Well, there's nothing in the law that says, if you're defending yourself, that you have to drop your gun and put up your fists. Hell, if he drops his gun, somebody else can pick it up and use it against him or other people. That's totally irresponsible. You can't do that as a gun owner. You're responsible for that gun. You have to protect it. You can't let other people get it. If somebody takes your gun and goes and kills somebody, you might be liable for that. And so there doesn't need to be any undecided jurors who were pushed in Kyle's favor by what Kraus or Richard said. Not at all. because what they're doing, and I didn't quite understand, I didn't fully appreciate this when I originally heard Barnes say it a while back, but he said that closing arguments are not about convincing undecided jurors. Nobody's really undecided by that point. It's about giving the people on your side, ammunition to battle it out in the jury room. Give them talking points so that they can go in and make the argument based on the jury instructions for your side. And Kraus did that for the defense. That's what he did. He conceded Kyle's right to self-defense. And so all you have to do, if you are pro-acquittal on that jury, is make the case, which is very easy, that given that Kyle had the right to self-defense, everyone agrees on that. That's not in dispute. It was okay to use a gun, which he had on him. And he was legally able to possess that gun because they dropped the gun charge. There's no problem here. He had every right to possess the gun. He couldn't have possessed a handgun. That was illegal, I'm pretty sure. Because the gun charge was dropped because Kyle had a rifle. If he had a pistol, that gun charge would still be there because he would have been, a minor, and minors aren't supposed to possess those kinds of deadly weapons. Under Wisconsin law, it's only rifles and shotguns. So Kyle's only weapon that he was allowed to have was a rifle. He had that, and he was attacked, and he used it to defend himself. Oh, and if anyone on that jury's ever fired a gun, you know that Kraus was full of crap when he said there's no such thing as a right-handed gun. Almost every gun ever made is right-handed. In the last few years, there have been some ambidextrous guns, more and more coming out. A lot of guns are available, with ambidextrous features, including the gun that Kyle had. But you can clearly see in the pictures, Kyle's gun is not ambidextrous. It does not have an ambidextrous safety or mag release or a left-handed mag release. It's a right-handed gun. The controls are for a right-handed shooter. I will give, I'll ding Richards a little bit because he was pointing out, oh, well, look where the ejection port is. It'll blow brass in your face. And that's true on older AR-15s. That particular one had an A4 upper, which has a brass deflector cast into the receiver. So that's not as big of an issue. I'm pretty sure that left-handed shooters can shoot an AR with that deflector cast into the receiver, which has been there ever since the A2 revision back in the 80s, without much of a problem. And even original ARs, you can kind of get away with shooting those left-handed, and occasionally you'll get a big hot piece of brass hitting you in the face, which is not comfortable. But the overall point still stands that that's a right-handed gun. And so when they show you a picture, which would dictate, as I believe Posobiec, Jack Posobiec on Twitter originally pointed out, glad Richards picked up on this, Kyle, in that picture, in the hocus pocus out of focus picture, would have to be pointing the gun left-handed. That's ridiculous. And what they, are calling to be his hand, if you look on the video, that little blob is actually stationary, seems to be a reflection of the mirror of the Duramax. I think there was plenty in the defense's closing arguments and Kraus's rebuttal for any pro-defense juror, at least one of them, because if one of them was taking good notes, and I don't know, we're not in the courtroom, I hope to hell they were taking good notes. Any one of them could go in there, have a conclave with the other pro-defense jurors, and then they can all argue, I think, rather effectively against the pro-prosecution jurors. Now, they might not convince them. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we'll get full acquittal. I thought, based on everything I've heard from the experts and all that, and about the jury, and especially, Richard Barris's polling, which I have a great deal of respect for Richard Barris. I think he knows what he's doing. He's proved that. At least to me. I think he has the best track record of anybody in polling. And so if he says 2/3 of the Kenosha County population presumes Kyle to be guilty, you're not going to get an acquittal very easily. And so all these defense jurors need to do is stick it out. They need to have good enough arguments to where they can't be bullied by the pro-prosecution witnesses, to where they can feel justified in standing their ground and saying, no, this isn't right. We will not vote to convict on any charge. Or, if they're lucky and the other jurors are at all reasonable and persuadable, they will accept that Kyle was within his right of self-defense and will vote to acquit. It's as simple as that at this point. I don't think that... I think that what the defense had to do yesterday was just not lay an egg, not hurt themselves, not shoot themselves in the foot, and they would at least get one holdout juror. Now I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few, like 3 or 4. If they get a third of the jury on their side, I would not be shocked. And the more split the jury is, if it's not 11-1, I think that there probably will be a mistrial quicker because there will be less hope that that juror will flip. Because I think after a while the judge will say, you know what, these guys are kind of split somewhat evenly, 1/3 to 2/3 maybe, or even half and half, 50-50, and he probably says, you know what, we're not getting anywhere here, mistrial. And at that point, I believe, from what I've heard from the legal commentary, he could still declare a mistrial with prejudice, which would be as good as an acquittal. Wouldn't be as good as an acquittal for public opinion purposes, but legally, it's as good as an acquittal because Kyle could not be charged again for that same crime. So all in all, I'm feeling optimistic. Am I optimistic about an acquittal? No, not necessarily. But I doubt at this stage we're going to get a conviction on any count. I think that there is a strong enough line that was drawn yesterday that the jurors will be sufficiently polarized to where they won't feel the need to give in. And that's a good thing. A hung jury is preferable to a compromised jury. Polarization is a good thing. I would rather have a world of, Gage Grosskreutz and, I don't know, Kyle's kind of moderate, so he's not really a good example, but whatever the polar opposite of Gage Grosskreutz is, I'd rather have a world of radical, or I shouldn't say radical, but committed left and right-wing people than, a world of David French and Hillary Clintons. I mean, could you imagine a jury of a bunch of David French and Hillary Clintons? The moderate temperament of somebody like David French has led him, and others like him, Tom Nichols, and the like, to essentially, at this point, support frying Kyle for his terrible crimes of self-defense. The victim blaming from the intellectual and cultural elite in this case is off the charts. So, with that said, hopefully this video will be made irrelevant soon, because if we get a not guilty verdict back tonight, but that's probably not going to happen at this point. I was trying to wait all day, hoping, but now the longer it takes, I wait to record this. The less time it will be relevant, but hey, I'm going through with it. Hopefully we get a verdict in time for tomorrow's video.